we were in the middle of an international move from France to Germany. And exactly that same week, we sent our eldest child off to university in the States. And it was exactly then, the first week that he was at university, that he was involved in a water accident where he was trying to save the life of a drowning classmate. And in the process, that classmate survived, and our son, Parker is his name. He lost his life. He was knocked out underwater and was never fully revived and was in a coma for 36 hours. And we were able to gather that it was clear that there was no brain activity at all. And so we were faced with that horrific, excruciating decision to turn off life support. And we were there as a family when he took his last breath. And it was there where the universe kind of folded in on itself. And that is where inspired, everyday, incredible human beings clumsily but divinely did the best they could. At the scene of the accident itself, there was a student, I'll just call him Jake, and he had just received the priesthood just a week or two before, and he had never given a blessing. And when they dragged our boy lifeless and blue out of the water, they looked around among all of these students that were there, and they said, "Who has the priesthood? Who has the priesthood?" And Jake sort of sheepishly raised his hand and said, "I do, but I've never done anything with it before." And he put his hands on Parker's lifeless face, on his body, and he expressed love to him. And he said, "Just hold on. We love you. We're going to get help. We're going to get help." So this young guy was an angel for us. The students immediately drove to the closest house where a mom and a son were just sitting, having their evening meal. And these students burst in through the door and said, "We need help. Our friend is not breathing." This mother and son, think of this. They just happened to be EMTs. They bolted out of their house, got in their truck, and drove to this place and started doing CPR on their son. And the woman, her name is Margie, who didn't know my son. She didn't know me. She stayed with him when the ambulance came, went all the way with him, and still until they got a heartbeat going. When he finally got to the ICU, there was a young nurse there. Her name is Andrea. I followed her life since because she meant so much to us. She just quietly attended to him. I saw her once. I looked outside of the room when I had arrived, and I saw her quietly leaning against the wall and crying. And just the sight of another person wiping away tears for my sorrow was incredibly comforting, to know that somebody else feels a measure of this pain that I'm feeling. The people in that community where the accident took place later held a whole memorial for this boy that had only been there for a handful of days. And you know what the police did? They did an entire convoy with their lights slowly blinking down the roads to take us all from this memorial to the site of the accident. It was this quiet farmland vigil. And I'll never know the names of all of the people that participated there, but they were angels too. When we arrived in our new place to live, which was Munich, we were fresh from a funeral. I mean, we still had the funeral flowers in plastic bags pressed in Parker's own suitcases full of all of his mortal belongings. We lugged them into this new apartment and unpacked them. And I don't know whether anyone can completely grasp how eviscerating that was for us. But we arrived at a new ward, a new school. And what did the ward people do? The young women's leader took our daughter into her care. The primary leaders took our younger sons into his care. The state president was very loving and kept on asking how we were doing and if he could support us. And these people too had fasted and prayed for us, even though they didn't know us. And I could go down a long, long list of names. Our friends back in France where we had lived continued to reach out to us. The director of that school called us every single Sunday for a year. This is no one who would consider himself a person of faith, but he was an angel in our lives because he attended to us. And that's what angels do. They show up. And they might not even say anything. They might just listen. Maybe that's what angels do best, is that they sit with us and they listen in our agony and in our pain. The teachers at the new school that we showed up with, we had let them know that these kids were just weeks away from major trauma. The second grade teacher, her name was Sharon. She was amazing with our little 7-year-old. The English teacher, her name was Angela. She was absolutely wise and caring with our 11 and 12-year-old. There were people that had never known us before, but when they heard about our loss, they would stop. They would stop in the middle of the conversation and they would just quietly say, I'm so brokenhearted for you. That's also what angels do. They say, I sorrow with you. And then they also say, do not fear not, because I'm going to stay with you. You know how when a whole family has gone to a funeral, all of the men are in dark suits. So we had friends that went out and bought dark suits for our little 7-year-old and for our 11-year-old and took care of them that way. And when the funeral was over and we were going to pack those same suits into suitcases to take on a flight to go to a new country, a new world, we took our suits to a dry cleaner in the middle of Provo, Utah. And when we went to pick them up, pinned onto the plastic around these dark suits, I get really emotional when I describe this because I never had a chance to thank whoever wrote this little message, but it was a little white Post-it note with a straight pin pinned through the plastic. And it just said, and it was written in big pen, and it said, we mourn with you at this time of great loss. And that was it. And you know what? Today I still have that little Post-it note in a special place in all of our memorabilia. That was someone who was an angel in our lives. And then when we arrived in Munich, which was where we were moving in Germany when this happened, there's a beautiful park, this gorgeous park in the middle of Munich. And we saw when we walked through it that there were these benches all around, and we thought, we want to establish a bench here for our son Parker. So we went to the little office full of strangers speaking German that oversaw all of these benches. And we were introduced to a man who walked with us through this park. And we described to him that we wanted to put a memorial plaque on a bench so that people could enjoy sitting on this bench. And it was for our son. And he turned to us and he said, oh, is your son having his birthday, or is he graduating, or what would the occasion be that you'd want to make a plaque on this bench for your son? And I still remember where we were standing in the middle of this big park. It was in the late winter. We were all bundled up. And my husband turned to him and said, well, our son lost his life and his birthday is in February. It's coming up and we'd like to do it for him. And this man stopped in his tracks and his entire countenance changed. And he said, we're going to find a very special place and we're going to make a very special bench. And I will take personal responsibility for this bench. We hadn't known that man from before. I know his name, Herr Bartlemus is his name, but to each of these people, by name or those whose names I don't know, my message would be simple, and it would be, thank God for angels like you. And whether you know it or not, you were prompted by God